Station, this is Houston. Are you ready for the event?
Houston, this is Station. I am ready.
Canadian Space Agency, this is Mission Control Houston. Please call station for a voice check.
Station, this is CSAPAO. How do you hear me?
I have you loud and clear. How me?
We can hear you loud and clear.
Welcome on board the International Space Station. I'm ready to speak with you.
Okay, so David, we have many media here at the CSA, and they all have one question for you to start with. As a physician, what changes or experiences are you noticing as your body adjusts to being in space?
So adjusting to space is a new thing for me, and it is. We get a lot of training back on the ground around the world in Houston and Moscow and Montreal and Canada and Japan and Europe, but none of the training we get prepares you for weightlessness. And so I do the typical rookie mistakes, try not to crash anywhere, and my colleagues are showing us how to fly. And the other thing we notice about our bodies, of course, is that you lose a sense of orientation, and initially it's easy to get lost, but we'll get used to it.
Bonjour, Monsieur Saint-Jacques. Hugo Giguère, la presse canadienne.
Hello, Mr. Saint-Jacques. This is from the Canadian press.
Votre commentaire avait été d'être abasourdi. Qu'est-ce que ça voulait dire plus précisément? Puis est-ce qu'il y a quelque chose justement de
What does it mean, precisely?
inattendu là, auquel vous n'étiez pas du tout là, préparé en toutes ces années et ces mois de
Well, having prepared all of these years and these most recent months, how does it feel to be up there?
Ben, peut-être la première chose qui m'a complètement sidéré, en fait, c'est dans la fusée Soyuz,
was in the
lorsque je
Soyuz
suis
rocket,
arrivé finalement
when I
en
finally
orbite,
arrived
c'était
in
la nuit,
orbit. It
et
was
le
the
premier
night
lever de soleil
and the
en
first
orbite par la
sunrise
fenêtre,
in
voir la
orbit
courbe de
through the
la Terre,
window.
la petite lumière, ligne bleue
This
de l'horizon,
blue line of the horizon.
une émotion vraiment
I was really
incroyable.
felt a strong
Et,
emotion,
après,
incredible
les
emotion.
heures qui ont suivi, on s'est rendu jusqu'à la station, tout s'est
And
redevenu
so
un peu
when we
comme
got to the station,
l'entraînement. Puis après ça,
and then
arriver à bord,
having
un autre
arrived on
moment
board
incroyable,
at the station,
pour
another
rencontrer
incredible
d'autres
moment
êtres humains
to
qui
meet
vivent
other
à bord
human
de
beings
cette,
who live aboard
cette station spatiale
this
qui
space
orbite autour de la
station,
Terre depuis des décennies.
who
Je le savais en
has
théorie,
been out
mais
in
ça
operation
m'a,
for decades. I felt
reconnaître
this
ça m'a
strong
vraiment
feeling
impressionné.
and was highly impressed. Made a strong impression on me.
Michel Nortelet, Radio-Canada.
Michel Nortelet to Canada. You talked about fulfillment of your dreams in your work. Your program for the next several weeks aboard the space station will consist of what?
Alors, on a un programme très
we have a
chargé.
very
Dès
loaded
notre
program.
arrivée, une capsule cargo
We have a
Dragon,
cargo
SpaceX,
capsule, the Dragon by
arrivé,
SpaceX, which
et
has
on a
arrived.
passé la journée
We
hier
spent the day yesterday
à
to
sortir
empty
de là tous les
and to
équipements
pull out
scientifiques
all
dont
of
on a
the
besoin.
scientific
Et on a
equipment and
commencé déjà à
experiments.
installer
We've already
tout ça, et
begun
on a tout un
to
programme
install all of
scientifique,
this.
surtout
We
en
have an
sciences de la
entire
vie,
schedule and
mais
program.
aussi programme un peu
It's
l'observation de la Terre.
has to do with
qui s'annonce
observation of the
pas
land,
mal chargé. C'est
of
très
the
excitant
Earth,
pour nous tous là,
which
d'utiliser la station à son
again,
meilleur
it's
pour des buts de recherche
up to us
scientifique
to
pour le bénéfice
use the
de tout le
station
monde.
to the utmost in order to be able to produce some good work here.
Bonjour, Marianne Lapierre.
Hello, this is Marion Lapierre of TVR. Of course, it's a dream that many little boys have. Are there any things that are more marvelous than you might have imagined? Including in your daily activities and things that you have to do.
Alors, c'est une étrange sensation.
Well, it's a strange sensation.
C'est comme si tout était un peu
It's as if it was a little bit familiar. What I see seems familiar, but the sensations are completely new. The sensation of floating, the fact that you can leave objects there. I can leave my microphone here, it doesn't go anywhere. I have to be careful because if I make it turn, it continues turning. And what's more extraordinary is that when we are in some country or other doing the work and going through procedures, we float by the window and we see the land. It's really quite amazing. And to see this connection of Earth within space, this blue, gracious countryside which turns slowly within space, this is very moving. Hello, Mr. Saint-Jacques. I am so-and-so from station. You have an enormous responsibility, of course, to work with your colleagues. They, of course, depend very strongly on you as well. Is there any one element of your work that would be most compelling, perhaps most challenging? We think about your excursions outside of the capsule.
Alors, le défi principal qu'on a,
well, the main challenge that my colleagues and I have here from Soyuz is after 3 weeks we have to learn everything aboard the station because Alex Serena, who is before us, is coming back to land. So we have 3 weeks in which to learn all that we can from him and to absorb as much as possible of their knowledge. And of course the procedures, naturally, there's an entire lifestyle on board which passes from one crew to another. There are many questions that we have to raise that arise from our experience and situation. The most important challenge is to be able to assume the station as our working environment. And this is someone from Canada. What has changed about your perceptions concerning space and work in space that might be different than what you had before? This is a process that has been going on for several weeks, but already I look at the Earth and it's evident that we are all human beings, the same species on the same planet, and that the fact that we're Canadian or American or Russian is a cultural detail, but not fundamental as to whom we are. It's evident that we see as we see it far off. And of course, from space, we see it as a planet on which all human beings live.
Amanda Klein with TTV Montreal. Can you describe your feeling or what was going through your mind the first time you saw Earth emotionally and just what your perceptions were?
Yeah, so during the launch on the Soyuz, that was very familiar. We're all very, very busy doing our procedures in a spacecraft that looks exactly like the simulator. And then we got to zero gravity at the engine cutoff. And then that was already strange, but it was nighttime. And then there was our first sunrise on orbit. And that was quite an emotional moment as I looked out the window and this little blue crescent starting to get brighter and brighter, and I realized, wow, this is actually the curve of the Earth. So that first sight, that first sunrise on orbit, I will never forget. It was just very moving. So, just so beautiful.
Good morning, David. Sean Costello, Spaceflight Insider. A question relative to your physiological adjustment, sleep cycles. Starting with your initial first night when you needed to make yourself, I guess, go to sleep, very exciting, and carrying on through the last week. How have you been able to balance these many sunrises, sunsets, and the shifting day?
Yeah, managing your sleep is is very, very important for crew members here because we often have to shift from one time zone to another to accommodate for events on the ground. So we launched on the Soyuz, and we were based on Moscow time, but arrived on board. Suddenly we had to shift to GMT, London time. But, you know, as you said, with the excitement and the adrenaline, we weren't very sleepy anyway. So we have, we use things like lighting inside. We make it dimmer and redder in the evening, and then brighter and bluer during the day for our body's ability to adjust to light to help us. And then, yeah, it is strange sometimes when you feel like it's evening and you want to go to bed and you have a last look outside and it's a bright daytime or it's a sunrise. You have to kind of decouple the events outside from the events inside station. And we end up developing our own sense of time that relates to our life inside space station.
Elias Aboud with CBC. A lot of astronauts who've gone through what you're going through say that the first few days or week are the most difficult, getting their bodies adapted to zero gravity and space because of all the changes in the fluids and so on. What have you found the most difficult in this first week or so?
The most difficult I found was that initially I could feel that my brain kept on looking for which way is up and which way is down. And of course, because there's no gravity here, you're losing all that information that normally your inner ear gives you. And so that's very disconcerting and disorienting initially. And I noticed as the days going by that I seem to rely more and more on just on my vision to decide which way is up, down, left, right. And now, already after a week, I feel far less confused in my sense of orientation. So that's maybe the biggest item. Another item was that, maybe you can hear it from my voice, I'm a little bit congested here, like most people are, because the gravity is not there to pull blood down into your legs. Your body has to adjust to that. So initially you have kind of a big red puffy face, and over days it kind of becomes normal again. But I can still feel a sort of a sense of congestion, as if you remember as a child hanging from the monkey bars in the park, how your head kind of puffs up. That's kind of how you feel constantly initially, and then it normalizes. That's the other big thing that you realize. And of course, floating around, which is a totally new feeling. It's a bit like being in water, except you can't swim.
Bonjour David, Philippe Mercure à la presse.
Hello David.
Pouvez-vous parler du décollage, les forces G, les émotions ressenties au moment où la fusée s'envole? Comment c'était?
Well, from the after the plunging, the dives, and then the flight, how did it all go? Well, this is a day that we practiced intensively. That is very well known. We were going down as in the diving suit. I already seen this. It's very impressive, but I was already familiar with what it was going to be like. The procedures are all the same, and so the simulation was really prepared us. Of course, once you take off, you feel the crushing acceleration of the G-forces and the vibration of the rocket that takes us off. And every time you have a new stage of the rockets, you feel this impulse backwards as you accelerate until finally, as you arrive into orbit, and again you're sort of pushed forward rather violently, and so there's the end of acceleration. Well, what I saw is my pen that I use for my tablet. If I let go of it, if it begins to float away from me, if there's a little toy that kids have taken me, and microgravity that we use, you can see it floating above me in front of my eyes. And for me, this was the launch experience with a rocket, these tremendous forces that push you for minutes, minute after minute, and then it releases you. And then you are, of course, going around the Earth.
So there's been a lot of talk, Mr. Saint-Jacques, about the acclimation process. But I guess what I would want to know maybe is, have you had a chance to be able to maybe take a step back as you're out of this world, maybe get out of your head and think of what this means for other people, like just in terms of the importance this has for the Canadian space program, inspiring kids. Like so many kids are inspired to go to space and be astronauts because they see people like you doing what you're doing. So do you ever have a chance to maybe, take a step back and think about what it means for you to be there, not just for yourself, but also for Canada?
Thanks for that question. Yes, it is a very humbling privilege to be here. Very, very few people have had that chance to see these views on behalf of humanity, and I take this very seriously, the responsibility to absorb this and retransmit it the best I can, because it is something that as a child myself has really awed me the first time I realized that the Earth was this sphere floating in space, and that was reality. And that new perspective really set me off on a lifelong path to study sciences and explore, because I think it is in our hearts this desire to always take another step back to get a bigger and bigger and bigger picture, starting from metaphorically the day when we left the caves and then explored the plains and climbed mountains and then went on the oceans and then flew in the air, and now those steps back are taking us away from Earth herself. And so I think it's that quest at the heart of humanity to constantly explore further and constantly broaden our perspective to really understand better the world around us. And that is perhaps, in my mind, the most important aspect, legacy of spaceflight.
David, Ivan Semeniuk from the Globe and Mail would like to know, have you had any time to look at Earth? And if so, what have you seen? And when will you share?
So yes, I've had the chance to look at the Earth several times. I've had the chance to take photos of my hometown and start to dabble with Earth photography. The crew members who are here before me are very, very good at it, Alex and Serena, so they're showing us all their tricks. It is just an never-ending sense of awe looking at our blue planet. That thin blue line of the atmosphere, that color, that flash of blue, it's just unbelievable. And also the beauty of sunrises and sunsets, and the sense of the size of the planet, to be able to see the whole of the Earth and get a feeling for the size of it. It's very touching and it's very humbling, and it makes you want to go back to Earth and help make it better.
Raymond Fournier, Réseau Technosciences. En tant que scientifique, quelles sont vos expériences nouvelles? Qu'est-ce qu'ils vont apporter?
Scientifically, what have been your new experiences, your new experiments? What will they contribute? And what could be their positive effects on the human beings? Well, we have a very loaded program, very full one, for concerning the effects of microgravity on the human body, especially with the muscular system, the nervous system, the bones, Our experience is very interesting. It's connected to, and it's supported by the Canadian Space Agency, which involves with the development of telemedicine techniques, remote medicine technique. Being very prudent, of course, trying not to be ill, but if an injury happens on board or an illness on board, we take the precautions to be sure that we have the medications on board, to be sure that we're able to treat ourselves. This problem is to bring, of course, assistance to the astronauts, which is very similar to the, in fact, exactly like the procedure that brings medical assistance to people who are far away on Earth. This space research consists partly of combining or marrying the benefits of remote medical assistance, which of course is provided to distant regions, and this is provided and supported by the Canadian Space Agency, again, to contribute to the effectiveness of telemedicine or remote medicine.
Merci beaucoup, David. This is all
Thank you very much, David. This is all the time that we have.
See you soon, everybody. Bye-bye.
Station, this is Houston ACR. That concludes the event.
Thank you, David, Canadian Space Agency, and participants. Station, we are now resuming operational audio communications.